And good morning. We are back with episode 7 of Talking Tilton. It's in cooperation with the Tilton Historical Society and Scuba's Place Internet Radio. We're talking movie theaters today. John Bruno from Tilton is joining me right now. And John, your family actually used to own and operate the Tilton Movie Theater.
Correct.
Now tell me, how did your family get involved in this?
So really a long story. My grandfather came over from Italy, he and his brother, and they started a restaurant in Manchester. My grandmother and my father were still in Italy. He went over to visit her, and then she ended up having another son, Joseph. When my dad was 7, he his brother, and his mother came over to this country, and they helped with the restaurant in Manchester. And then my grandfather had a bad heart attack, and the doctor said, John, you got to get out of this business. So he ended up selling the business to a guy that used to be his dishwasher. Said that he wanted to buy it, and he said, I'll pay you so much a week, and he did.
Wow.
So it was paid off. In the meantime, my grandfather went over to Keene and got involved with another guy, and they bought a theater over there. And things didn't work out as a partnership. So he ended up coming up to Tilton and opened up the Tilton Theater. Can't tell you exactly what year that was, but it was in the early 30s, I assume.
I mean, I was reading up on it with the history of that. And now, was the theater already there and they just took it over, or did they build it from the ground up?
There used to be a theater in the Herrick blocks, if you knew where that was, on
Yes.
the corner of, and I believe it was upstairs. I don't really know who owned that, and I don't know what happened to it. Where the existing theater that my grandfather and grandmother owned, as far as I know, they owned it. I don't know for sure. It was before my time.
It had to be pretty cool to grow up and to have a theater. I always wanted to own the Regal in Franklin and restore it. But to be part of that whole lifestyle, that's been a dream of mine. So tell me a little bit about your experience with the theater. What did you do? What did you see? What was the atmosphere like?
Well, I was born in 1938, and so obviously I wasn't running to the movies at that time.
Right.
And probably I started going to the movies probably when I was about 6. So you're talking maybe around 1944. I do know that when I was born, my grandfather and grandmother owned the theater. My father was the theater manager. And my sister, who was 4 years older than me, they owned it when she was born. So beyond that, I can't tell you. But
Okay.
anyway, growing up, I used to go on, to the matinees on Saturday and Sunday. And, Saturdays, because we'd have good westerns, might be with Roy Rogers or Gene Autry or Tom Mix, something like that. And on Sundays, there's usually either a war picture or a musical. And during the school year, they used to book pictures depending on the schedule at Tilton Prep School, because we used to get a big clientele that would come down from up there, and they'd try to play pictures that they'd want to see.
So take me on a little trip. From from the street into the theater. What did it look like? Can you describe it to me?
When you went into the front door, it was a lobby, and they had, posters of coming attractions all along both walls, all the way up. On the left-hand side, there was a brass railing. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's still there or what, but there's one just like it at the Tilton Inn right now. And the previous owner, I asked if it came from the Tilton Theater, and she said no. So I just kind of dropped it there, but it sure does look like it. And I spent a lot of time polishing it with brass cleaner.
I can only imagine.
But the lobby was kind of an off. The floor was painted. It was an off red, and went up on the after you went to by the ticket booth. There was a concession stand that we had candy and popcorn and stuff. And from there, you went up. There's a couple of French doors that were usually open, and the ticket taker was there. And then you went up into the theater. The theater held 315.
That's pretty good sized.
Seats. Yeah. And back in the early 50s when CinemaScope came in, my dad invested in that. And he got the Bausch and Lomb lenses and stuff, the best that he could get. And we had people used to come down and they used to like watching it in our theater because we had our screen, unlike some of the theaters, was not patched and added on to. We got a new screen that went right across the front, and so there was no seams in it or anything. And so, we had a big clientele that used to come from Franklin and Laconia area, as well as Tilton, Northfield, and Samberton.
Now, how long did the theater operate for?
Well, my dad ran it until 58, I think it was, and it had gotten to the point with the television coming into the scene and with drive-in theaters in the summertime, it was very sparse unless it rained.
Right.
And we did very well. But it got to the point where he had an opportunity to sell produce.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was doing that a few days a week, and then he got offered a job selling beer for Lake City Beverage. And that turned into a full-time job, and he was running the theater. And still, he used to have to go to Boston to book movies.
Mm-hmm.
I went down a few times with him. But a lot of times the salesman would come up here and they would work things out.
Now, how much time?
And then he got to the point where, yeah.
Yep, no, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
It got to the point where he said, I'm tired of working 7 days a week. So he sold the business, the theater business, to a Polish fellow named Ted Sochavinsky from Franklin. He was an immigrant. He also worked at a market in Franklin. And he did the theater for, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years. And but the business just kept going down.
Right.
Unfortunately, he really didn't have the experience. I helped him out. My dad helped him out for the first 6 months, and then I worked with him. I had learned to run the projectors, so I was doing a lot of that. Because if I had a date on a Saturday night, I'd have to find someone else to do it for me.
I get it.
But,
I get it.
Yeah. And Teddy closed it up, and then another fellow, and I can't think of his name right now, but he used to be a manager. He was very young, and he was a manager for the Regal Theater in Franklin. And
Mm-hmm.
he tried to redo it, and I think the big problem with both he and Teddy, their choice of pictures wasn't that great.
Gotcha.
They're dealing with these, MGM, Paramount, Fox. They would take advantage of them and get them a lot of Class B movies and stuff. And, okay, we'll give you one good movie, and you sign a contract and you got 20 lousy ones,
Jeez.
And so it went to the point, and that this last fellow just closed it up. I don't remember his name. It was Kenny something, but and that was the last of it. And it stayed that way for many, many years, and then someone bought, well, I guess due to lack of repair, the auditorium part, which was actually a separate building.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they had auctions there for a few years and things. But it was a flat roof, which you don't do in this part of the wood.
Right.
And eventually the roof rotted and caved in. So they tore down that part of the theater. I'm not sure what happened to all the projectors and everything. I think they had offered them to Tilton Prep School, but whether or not they took them, I don't know.
Now, do you think there's anything left of the lobby or anything like that in the building, or did they pretty much clean it out?
I have no idea.
That'd be fun to explore.
It would. I don't even know who owns the well, I shouldn't say I don't know. I don't know who it is, but I know it. Last I knew it was somebody from Everett, Massachusetts, that owned that whole block.
Wow.
And it's the thing is locked is I've always wanted to look through because there was glass windows in the two front doors, and just to see if that brass thing was there, but you can't because they got curtains they put in the window, so you can't see anything.
I noticed that.
I have no idea who has a key or anything.
Right. I know, when my wife and I were up there visiting last week, my mother and I were walking down Tilton, and she said, all right, this is where the theater was. You see these doors right here. This is where we went in. Because she remembers, going in there as a kid and teenager and actually watching the movies. And I thought, man, what a neat experience. But you're right, because the doors and the windows, they're all kind of hazed over. You can't really see anything. But
yeah, they have curtains on the inside.
Yeah.
So you can't see anything.
We might have to try to find this guy and see if we can't get in there. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of itching to do that.
Okay, well, if you went next door, any of those shops, they could tell you who owns the block.
That's awesome. That sounds like a challenge. I want to do this. I really do, because I love exploring the old buildings and looking at history and that sort of thing. I think, there was actually talk, and several people were saying, wouldn't it be cool if we could bring back a movie theater to Tilton? People would flock into town. I mean, in your opinion, what do you think about that? You think if something like that was brought back into Tilton, that it would flourish?
I don't know. I know they go to these theaters like the one over in the shopping center now. They've got, 6 different theaters in it.
Yeah, always the multiplex.
Whether they would come to a small theater in the town, of course the other ones that they build now, they don't have the ambiance that you would have in the small theaters, the charm and whatever.
Right. I think, that's one of the things, too, because my mother and I even went up to see the renovation of the Colonial in Laconia, and they did an absolutely beautiful job on that. And I think it kind of brings you back to think about the history in these small towns and how important it is to hold on to that. It really is, because so much history is being wiped out. And just the thought of a theater back in the day in Tilton, it just makes you think what a thriving and moving town this was and still is today.
Well, back then, of course, there's some buildings that have been torn down,
right,
especially going down toward where the lights are. But every store, there was no empty stores at all. And at one time, Tilton was a shopping place for everywhere around, and there's nothing you could not get here. You didn't have to go to Laconia or Concord or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And you have to remember, a lot of these people didn't have cars either.
Right.
But we had a couple of undertakers, of course, but one of them also owned a furniture place. So it is at one place you could get a casket, but the other place. My son still has some of my old, like my bedroom desk. Mm-hmm. I've got a bookcase, things like that solid maple that came from Ethan Allen.
Oh, wow.
And we had several little stores. We had a small, well, if you're looking at the theater, on the left-hand side right now you got two shops. But when I was a kid, that was a small First National store. And up the other end of the street, just before you get to the end, was a small A&P store.
Oh, wow.
And then across the street, next to the hardware store, you had, it was called Christian's Market, and another store. Then you had a Newberry's, and on the other side of that, you had Mike Meserve's store.
Oh, I remember that.
Also, where Paulie's restaurant is right now, that used to be Thibodeau's Market, and right beside it was Muscadini's Market. And then you had Presby's Drugstore and Salmon Newsstand. Then you had the A&P, the small A&P. And you had Pettingill's Jewelry Shop. And then Witch's Barber Shop. And you had Pop's Diner. Of course, you had the Town Hall, which at the time included the jail down below.
Mm-hmm.
And next to Meserve's, as I said, you had the Five and Dime, you had Christians, you had the hardware store, the Episcopal Church. And you went right down. There was Rafley's Market was down toward the end. There was 2 or 3 restaurants in town. Had HBIZ, which was a clothing store.
Mm-hmm.
And across the street, we had another one which Mr. Filato ran for a clothing store. As I said, anything you wanted, you could get. We had a printing press store here.
Wow.
Place that sold rugs and carpets and stuff. So you could do all your shopping right here in Tilton, and it was a busy little place.
I remember a lot of those stores that you had mentioned, and I think going into Mike's and picking up, I remember my grandmother would always send me for cigarettes, pick up some meat, groceries, and then of course when I was done there, I'd go over to Newberry's. They had the penny candy. I would load up. I mean, I was sugared up as a kid. And, it was a natural thing. And then my dad would always go to Earl's Barber Shop. And both of us would get our hair cut. And I still remember Earl every time we, walked in. He's like, boys cut? Yep. All right, sit right down. We're going to take care of you. So, I mean...
Well, let me tell you a story about Earl if you want to hear it.
Sure, go for it.
Because I went there for years as a kid. And in our yearbook, there was a picture of Barbara Wheaton in the chair, and he was supposedly cutting his hair. He was one of the sponsors of our yearbook. But more recently, my wife used to go all the way up to Thornton to get her hair done, because the gal that was up there used to be one of her neighbors, and she went there, had this gal for 40-some-odd years. And last year, she retired. And my wife was her last paying customer, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so we had to find another one down close to here. So we ended up going up to Bay Hill, and she made an appointment. And we went in, and I saw this car, and the license plate was MC2. So when I went with my wife, and I wasn't sure if I could even go in because of COVID, but yeah, you can come in. I had a mask on and stuff. And I said, I see the MC2 out there. She said, yeah, that's my car. I said, God, that used to be my barber's, Earl Kimball. I'm his younger daughter.
Oh, my God.
And right now she's been cutting my hair.
Holy mackerel. What a small world. What are the chances?
Yeah.
That is way too cool. Oh, my God,
yeah.
Some great memories. I mean, absolutely amazing. So I got to ask you, speaking about memories, what do you think your favorite memory is of the old Tilton Theater?
Oh God, I had a lot of them. But I remember Lou Reed is the one that taught me how to run the projectors, and I remember the first time one night I had to go up and do it by myself, and man, I was scared. Am I going to do it right?
And those projectors weren't anything to kick at either. I mean, they took a lot of electricity to run those things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's special wiring and everything for them. And as far as the mechanical part, I probably, and I think that was my biggest issue. If anything happened, what do I do?
Right.
I knew how to thread the machines and get the lamps going and all this and that stuff, but if some part had stopped working, what do I do? And
not like there was a manual.
Not really. I'd have to make a phone call and say, "Hey, what do I do?" But I really didn't have too much problems. They were good machines,
right?
And as I said, my dad invested in the best, and we had a reputation of having the best pictures around as far as on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, it was one flat screen. It wasn't the other theaters around here, including the Colonial and Franklin. They added on. So as you're looking at it, you see this big seam that have a seam on both sides.
I remember it.
Yeah, and we had a nice picture and very, very sharp. As I said, we had terrific lenses, but also, our throw wasn't that far either.
Right.
So you could get a sharper picture rather than trying to blow it up to go out, 400 feet or something.
Right. Exactly. So you think running the projector was kind of like your best memory of the theater?
Got my first smooch in there.
Oh, there we go. Now we're talking. See, I knew I could pull it out of you somehow. There you go. All right. Well, I mean, everybody falls in love at the movies, so I totally get it.
Well, she was the aggressor.
Oh, so we're going to blame it on her. I get it. Okay. I know how that goes. I've been married twice. I get it. Oh, my gosh. I mean, if you had a chance to go back and relive it and do it all over again, would you?
In a heartbeat.
I know you would.
I remember being out front of the theater with my dad on VJ Day and the celebrations that were going on around there. And the street itself, you had all these big elm trees along it. It was terrific. You could run down. You had 3 pharmacies in town.
Wow.
That doesn't happen today.
No, it doesn't.
You don't have any pharmacies there. They're all out in the big box stores.
Exactly.
And you go in, they don't say, "Hi, John, how are you?"
Nope.
I remember Stubbins, they'd have the daily paper, so people would go in and get their daily paper, but they'd buy their cigarettes and stuff. And we used to go in there or up at Harrick's drugstore and have ice cream after school. And, it's just, back then they call it the greatest generation. Well, trust me, it was.
And people were personable. You could strike up a conversation. Everything was good. They weren't trying to kill each other. It was a totally different world.
Yeah, and you walked up and down the street, you knew everybody.
Right. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling.
It was. It made you feel right at ease and safe. Very safe.
A lot different than the world we live in today, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah, if you ever are able to get into that lobby, I'd like to go in. I mean, it'd be strange, going up to where the auditorium started, and it's just a wall now. I'll tell you a little story about that. And I told you my grandfather came from Italy.
Right.
He used to make his own wine, until just before he died. Well, the theater had underneath the auditorium, it was a dirt cellar. We had a furnace down there. It was on a slope, and occasionally it would get flooded out.
Right.
When the river backed up. But I was told several years ago, because there was a big hole there for years, and the owner of the building, that would have been a big liability if somebody had gotten hurt. They finally put a fence around it, but I understand they found a few bottles of wine that my grandfather had planted the dirt there because it was cool and everything. And I would have loved to have had one of those.
No kidding.
I don't know what happened to him, but that's a memory.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody that's going to be listening to this will know. Maybe they have it sitting in their kitchen somewhere.
Hey, I'd buy it. I wouldn't mind. If I had a couple, it's one for me, one for my sister who's down in Virginia, and a couple for the kids. Just to say, hey, it might be wine vinegar now, but
hey, it's probably aged pretty well.
It goes back to the 40s.
Wow, I can't even imagine what that would taste like right now. It's probably it's probably guaranteed to knock you on the can once in a while. That's for sure.
That's right.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking time out today for the interview. I definitely appreciate it. We'll look into that. I want to try to see if we can get a hold of somebody, maybe get in that building to see what's left over. And who knows? Maybe we'll find a couple of things.
You never know.
You never know.
Chatting with you.
All right. Thanks, John. We'll talk to you later. And it's been another edition of Talking Tilton with the Tilton Historical Society and Scuba's Place Internet Radio. We'll do it all over again in July. You never know who's going to be our next interview. Keep it right here to the Facebook page, and we'll also upload it to the Tilton Historical Society's YouTube channel.